do wonder, it was a joke, but Tom's downstairs, I'm upstairs, and the Hoover app is a cruel mistress. Anyway, so welcome all to I Wish I Knew How to Quit You, the VI editor and the birth of macOS as we know it, which is a fairly portentous title. And sometimes when you're trying to sort out a talk and you're trying to think of a title, sometimes a GIF comes out of nowhere, and divine intervention. So I wish I knew how to quit you. So hi, I'm Steve Quirke. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a white man in my it's late 40s now. I'm just going to have to roll with middle age. I'm a middle-aged white man with shortish, shaved hair, scruffy beard, glasses with sort of blue-black frames. And I am thrilled, that's a Steve Cook thing, I'm thrilled that the Macintosh team actually sort of took me up on my sort of computer history talk. I've just realized there is a little bit of AI in here, which is annoying. There shouldn't be any, but there is a little bit. But the other problem with it is I've had loads of fun researching it, but there are so many rabbit holes to go down. It's like, oh, wow! And it's kind of meant that getting the slide deck finished has been a challenge. But it is finished, for some values are finished, although I was told earlier they're never finished. But when I first started putting this together, and it felt like I was seeing sort of VI stuff everywhere. So this was on LinkedIn. This is Larry Tesler. She's a security researcher, and she's doing that standard, the battle of the editors thing that you should just, uninstall Emacs and get with the program. Or Ron Gilbert, not Graham Gilbert's dad. Ron is the inventor of Scum. So, Monkey Island, Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle. If you know what I'm talking about, awesome. If you don't, go and play those games. They are amazing. Ron's awesome, but he doesn't like Vim, which is fair. And then one of my former colleagues, Peter Gillard-Moss, a very smart technologist, and he must be because he can open VI, he can navigate to the right, and he can save without breaking anything. So, why is VI so sort of triggering for people? Why don't people like it? So I have a theory about this one. So you're a sysadmin. You're a power user. You can use a terminal. You can cup and grep and ls and all that sort of stuff, right? You know what you're doing. And then you open VI, or maybe worse, it's opened for you. You do a git commit, and it's the default editor, and it pops up. And you're like, oh, well, how do I? Well, I'll just do Control C. Control C's not work. Command Q. Why? What? I can't. It's kryptonite. What's quit? Just kill the terminal window. Run away screaming. This was not my first. That was my first experience with the editor. I'm not going to lie. So the thing is, VI is an example of a modal application. So it has different modes, right? So you're supposed to know that if you press the I key for that's insert mode. Of course it is. Now you can start typing. If you want to save, well, now you have to work out how to get back into command mode and then remind yourself how to save. It's not S. Of course, it's W. It's W. You're writing. So the thing is, that's. I'm glad that that's not the way that software works now. But it did. That was the way that software worked. So why did it change? What drove a world of easier to use operating systems and devices? So I'm going to place the blame firmly in the camp of Xerox. So it's the 1960s. I think this is the Xerox 914. It was their first big copier. I don't mean in physical size, I mean the one they sold loads of. So Xerox was like a cornerstone of corporate business America. People Xerox things, they Xerox their Xerox, they copied things and did more copies, and it was literally almost a license to print money. Not that would be illegal, but they were making a ton of money on copiers. And what it meant was, Xerox had a ton of money. Think sort of Apple or Nvidia levels of money, just massive amounts of money. But the CEO at the time, a guy called Peter McCulloch, was like, I'm worried that maybe in the future there could be a digital sort of, paperless office. I don't know how you're all getting on with your printer drivers and stuff. It hasn't quite panned out the way that Peter thought it would. But he was worried that where would Xerox fit in this sort of, paperless age? And so he looked down the back of his sofa, probably, found a few billion dollars, and he opened this. So at 1970, this is Xerox Parc. So the Palo Alto Research Center. So it's a good job it was in Palo Alto, because otherwise the acronym wouldn't have worked. So it's a mysterious 70s sort of sci-fi building, and they filled it full of some of the smartest computer scientists in the world. And they basically said, off you go, build cool stuff. There's no products, no agenda, just build awesome stuff, build the things you want to build, and we will pay for it. So, they had smart scientists, beanbag chairs, creative freedom. So, and a lot of really cool stuff came out of Xerox Parc that we use today. So Ethernet networking, Xerox Parc. Laser printing, Xerox Parc, although that feels a lot less exciting because it's just a glorified photocopy, who are we kidding? But still, it's exciting. But for me, the most exciting thing to come out of Xerox Parc was this thing. So in 1973, we get the Xerox Alto. So many people consider the Alto like the very first sort of person in terms of the way that you would interact with it. It had a keyboard and a mouse. It has a so white text. It had a graphical user interface. I'm loving that it's portrait, not landscape, because we were document handling. It has Ethernet networking, NetBoot. Graham Gilbert, we have NetBoot. But it wasn't the world's first personal computer for a couple of reasons. So one, it was never a product. It existed purely as a research toy for the kids at Xerox Parc. And second of all, they were $12,000 each. And that's $12,1973. I've read estimates that say that if they were going to sell this as a product, it would have been maybe $40,000 a unit. So it was never a sort of a saleable product, but it is recognizable as a computer that we can use. In fact, I found a really nice JavaScript emulator that I've been playing with, which I can share later. So for contrast, right, the rest of the world had to wait till 1975. This was the first personal computer that normal people could buy and play around with. This is the Altair 8800 based on some 8-bit Intel chip. So if we're talking user interfaces, you're looking at it. If you indulge me, there's an Altair 8800 emulator, so I can switch it on, and you literally do your noughts and your ones, and I don't know what I'm doing. And there's a run button somewhere. Here we go. And no, that's not it. Yeah, I'm programming a computer kit. I've no idea what I'm. Anyway, so this is the Altair 8800. When this was launched, Bill Gates dropped out of college. He went, "This is the future. I'm going to write BASIC for this," and they did. Microsoft's first product was BASIC for the Altair 8800. You could plug monitors and keyboards in, I promise, but as it came, it was a kit, and it looked like that. So that was your user interface for the 8800. And then, for contrast, we have to wait till 1977 to get the first, I guess, recognizable personal computer, the Apple II. So look at the difference. This is a product. There's a nice molded plastic case. You can take it home, stick it on your dining room table, make some graphs while throwing a fetchy blue sweaty. This is a home computer. Which struck me as really interesting, because everyone always grumbles, the iPhone wasn't the first smartphone. Oh, the iPod wasn't the. Yeah, well, this has always been the way. Apple build the one that's like a nice product you can use in your home. They build the one that's nice. Although I say nice. Again, if any of you have used an 8-bit computer, back in the 80s, he says dating the room. This is kind of the experience, right? So again, indulge me. So I'd found this while playing. So this is a really nice this is a BBC Basic sort of IDE for running code. This is probably the limit of my basic knowledge. Who am I kidding? But the point is, if you're using an 8-bit microcomputer in the 80s, you were writing basic code like this, or you were learning complicated commands to load stuff off cassette tape or floppy disk. That's what computing was like in the 80s. So let's get back to the Alto, though. So you've got this revolutionary computer. So then what's the text editor like on the Alto? So.
OK, first I'll load a file by pressing the G key, G for get. You can see the status bar updates. And now I type in the file name. And the file loads off disk.
So there's no menus at all in Bravo, right? It's all command-based. Well, key type based. You type a command key.
You can see that Bravo has a variety of different fonts. You can have things in bold. You can have things in italics. You can have your justified text. with nice margins. You can center text. You've got fancy fonts like Old English. It even has a mathematical font. So
Yeah, and the smiley face. I was blown away by the smiley face.
right. One of the fonts includes a smiley face and
In the 1970s.
fingers. So you could almost think of this as early emoji. So editing is a bit different from what you'd expect in about an editor, but we left click to select text, and then we right click to select the end of the text, and that's how we highlight a region, which you can see is now underlined.
Okay.
So if we want to change the way it looks, for instance, change the font, we hit L for look. And now the command line is updated with different options we can have for the look. B for bold, I for italic, different font numbers 0 through 9, C for center, J for justify, and so forth. So for instance, if we hit B, our selected text is now in bold.
Uh-huh. Can you change the font also?
So if we go back to L, we can choose a different font.
Yeah.
And now we
So-
have that.
And it goes on like that for a bit. And I think originally I put a bit more in, but actually the more I watch it, the more depressed it makes me because, so I knew about the Alto. I'd read books about the computing history stuff, and I knew they'd built this revolutionary graphical user interface, and I assumed that came batteries included. And seeing an Alto with the G for get, L for look, what? One mouse button to do thing and another, what is this? This is not an easy to use computer system. So enter one of the heroes of our story, Larry Tesler. So Larry Tesler was another one of the researchers at Parc, and he had feelings about modes. So that was his personalized license plate, no modes. He would wear a "Don't Mode Me In" t-shirt around the office. And he was, he felt that modes were like anathema to sort of ease of use for computing. If you want normal people to use a computer, modes are not it. So he petitioned at Xerox to be able to build something else. They built a new version of Bravo called Gypsy. And then Gypsy was mouse-driven and not mode-driven. So we have a bit of Larry demoing
Okay,
Gypsy.
so key concept, we'll select that. We go in the margin and drag down. We can select the lines of a paragraph. Now let's say we want to move that. We can cut. And when we cut, the text that you delete goes in the wastebasket. So this is like the clipboard of cut and paste implementations today. At Apple, we changed the name from wastebasket to clipboard, and that's stuck throughout the industry. Now that we've cut it, we can move it to another place. So I can delete this paragraph break, and say go down here and paste.
So bear in mind, we're still mid-70s here. So I know it feels incredible, like, wow, copy and paste. But no, copy and paste, this is huge. And this is all happening, in the well, not particularly secret, but the world of Xerox Parc. So meanwhile, back at Apple, the year's 1976, and this is Jeff Raskin. Jeff Raskin is Apple employee number 31. So a really interesting man. So let me think. He was. I'd written some stuff down. So he he'd studied philosophy, computer science. He'd been a professor in visual arts, but he was hired at Apple to write the manual, the friendly manual. And actually, it is the friendly manual. So he wrote the Apple II basic programming manual. So I found this on archive.org. There's a PDF you can go and download. And compared to some of the sort of books I would try to read back in the 80s, trying to learn BASIC, like Jeff's personality shines through this document. It's fun. It's a nice thing. It made me really kind of want an Apple II to do some basic programming. It also strikes me as interesting because ultimately, in the age of sort of an 8-bit computer, the manual is almost part of the user interface, right? This is how you can learn to make the thing do what you need it to do. So that's that. But Jeff had a dream. He wrote an internal doc at Apple called Computers by the Millions. He figured that there was a world where there could be computers in every home doing useful things. But he felt there were two real barriers for his Computers by the Millions dream. One of them was cost, and the other was ease of use. That if computers aren't easy to use, then we can't get them out there for people to do awesome things with. And so he got permission within Apple in 1979 to start his Macintosh project. So Macintosh was named after either Jeff's favorite apple or America's favorite apple, like one of an apple. And I've not typoed it, that's the Macintosh apple. And it was kind of renamed Macintosh internally, by testers, and then the wrong name stuck. We still have Macs today. So we put together a team. He had a hardware engineer by the name of Burrell Smith, very smart. Software engineer was someone called Andy Hertzfeld, and he'd started on a project for a low-cost $600 computer with a bitmap display designed to be really easy to use. And as part of that, it was Jeff, he organized a trip to Xerox Parc for Apple leadership in 1979. I think he was trying to validate that his approach to sort of interface design made sense. Of course, he'd been to Parc, because he was that sort of person. So we arranged the trip. So Steve Jobs and others went to Xerox Parc, had a demo, and this is kind of how it's landed with Steve.
They showed me really three things. But I was so blinded by the first one that I didn't even really see the other two. One of the things they showed me was object-oriented programming. They showed me that, but I didn't even see that. The other one they showed me was really a networked computer system. They had over 100 Alto computers, all networked, using email, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't even see that. I was so blinded by the first thing they showed me, which was the graphical user interface. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. Now, remember, it was very flawed. What we saw was incomplete. They'd done a bunch of things wrong, but we didn't know that at the time. It's still, though, they had the germ of the idea was there, and they'd done it very well. And within, 10 minutes, it was obvious to me that all computers would work like this someday.
So there you go. So at the time, Apple were working on Lisa, and Lisa was going to be a sort of conventional business-focused mini-computer. After that trip to Parc, no, it wasn't. It was going to be, Apple were going to build a GUI, and it was going to be the first system on the market, to bring the GUI to, well, not quite the masses. They were really expensive. But that was the plan. So loads of Lisa stuff went in the bin, and they started again. They hired a bunch of engineers from Xerox, Larry Tesler among them. And they set about turning, the GUI from like an academic experiment into a thing that people would use. And a really big part of that was user research. Larry was obsessed with user research. So what they would do at New Hire Day at Apple, Larry would try and grab as many people, ideally non-technical. You're the janitor, great, you're a sec, come with me. And he would do user testing, and they would iterate through the design of the GUI through these sort of non-technical people. And so because of that, they were able to sort of iterate and improve. But there's a fun story actually about, the UI when it says, OK, cancel. Originally it was going to say do it and cancel. And they had feedback going, why is the computer calling me adult? And they went, we'll go with OK. So these are the things that you learn when you user test. The other thing that Larry had pointed out is with user testing, you've got data. People don't like being called adult. If you have an argument in a room, whoever shouts loudest may win. So really, user research really sort of drove the way that Lisa was put together. So Lisa was really well received in the marketplace. There's some glowing reviews in this issue of Byte, but they were like $10,000 a pop. They did not sell very many, and ultimately it was a really costly failure. Similarly, Steve Jobs drove everyone at Apple crazy with his sort of demands for how Lisa would work. And Apple management were very concerned that Lisa had to succeed, and Steve was a loose cannon. And so ultimately, they kind of kicked him off the project. And so what happened? So Steve's kicked off the project, and he's like, you know what, fine. I'm going to go build my own graphical user interface with Blackjack. Well, anyway. So he chanced upon Jeff's project. He liked the idea of low cost. He liked the idea of easy to use. He liked the idea of being in charge, and he kind of sort of elbowed Jeff out of the way and very much made the Macintosh a Steve Jobs project. But lots of Jeff's ideas were retained, but ultimately the Mac became kind of a lot more about Steve.
The whole thrust behind Mac is to make everything easy to use and very visually oriented. As Steve said, we didn't want you to remember a lot of escape/command-Zs or anything like that. The whole idea is that whatever you see on the screen is what you're going to get on the printed page. For example, to type, all you do is you simply point the mouse somewhere, you click, and you start typing.
Again, I've got to start oversharing these incredibly boring things, which were really exciting in 1984. So 1984, we get the Mac. I think that's yeah, some of the engineering team, Bill Atkinson and Andy Hertzfeld, rendered in delightful sort of low-res 8-bit. So the Mac launches in 1984, and it succeeds in bringing so many of the lessons learned from the Lisa and improving on them and bringing it into a sort of almost affordable, if $2,500 in 1984 is affordable, but still revolutionary if you consider they were bringing that technology to the marketplace. So awesome. But ultimately, does Apple bring the GUIs out for the rest of us? So thing is, I know I'm in the wrong space, I'm in an Apple space. So no, my first exposure to a GUI was this. It was Windows 3. So back in 1990, we had an elderly 286 computer. I'd spent ages learning DOS commands, and we uploaded this instead, and you would launch it from DOS. And I got a GUI. So as Bruce is saying there, the whole point was, the whole point with Macintosh, so with Lisa, they built a system and they built all the apps with it as well. With Macintosh, you got a system, and the plan was that other vendors would write apps for you. And Microsoft had early access to the Mac. Microsoft had promised, Excel, Word, and other applications. But what it meant was it also gave Microsoft a head start in terms of what their UI might look like. It's interesting when Larry talks about how that's what the industry calls it, the clipboard, right? Because, so that's my experience of the GUI. But either way, so Windows 3 was a huge success. Actually, what's fun, this is a little emulator thing. Windows 1 is horrible, like god-awful horrible. Windows 2, you'll never guess, horrible. 3 is cool. I have happy memories of using that as an operating system. 3.1.1, cool, 95. So between, continued upgrades in macOS and Windows, the GUI is king. GUI is how we interact with computers now, right? We don't worry about modal editors anymore, right? So, it's 1976. I've noticed 1976 keeps coming up. It's clearly like a pivotal year, like when you watch Back to the Future and everything is all about 1955. Like 1976, right? So George Lucas is doing principal photography on some little movie called Star Wars, around the corner from Ben Tom's house, probably. And in Berkeley, in California, a young sort of engineer by the name of Bill Joy is busy writing first a line editor, EX, and then a text editor, VI. So this is Bill Joy, sort of a lot later, but he was 22, very smart. This is the system he designed VI on. So this is a dumb terminal. It's not a great picture, but if you maybe see that the escape key is next to Q. So the escape key is a really important key in VI, but it's in a stupid place on most keyboards. Similarly, if you look at is it HKLM, on that computer, it actually little had arrow keys. So if you're wondering why those were chosen for navigation, it's, it was right in front of him. But I guess the big question is, Bill, why the hell did you build a modal editor? Modal editors are stupid. And it turns out, in this weird bit of sort of tail chasing, he found a Bravo manual and kind of nicked the ideas from the Bravo editor, the one that Larry had said is stupid, we should really build Gypsy. So yeah, everything is kind of, everything always new again. So anyway, so what, that said, so the GUI is king. What the hell is VI doing on a Mac these days? Anyway, so again, the Macintosh, not actually a huge success. And Steve Jobs ends up being forced out of the board of Apple Computer. He's hired John Sculley away from Pepsi. There's some internal politics. Sculley presents his idea of Apple to the board. Steve presents his. The board sides with John Sculley. And then Steve's back, trying to work out what he's going to do because they've taken the Mac away from him. So he's decided what he's going to do instead is he's going to quit, sell all of his Apple shares, and he's going to build a new computer with he's going to build this black cube next computer. So Steve, he gets funding from Canon, he used some of his own money, and they build the next cube. So again, what I've realized with these demos is I need to speed them up because otherwise it's just me talking. But yeah, so they build the next cube. So with Next, it was designed as a high-end workstation for like university research and things like that. And for a workstation like that, you need an awesome operating system. So they built something called Next Step. So Next Step was based, it's a Mac kernel, I'm supposed to know what that means, I don't. It's based on FreeBSD, and you basically get this sort of Unix environment with a GUI. So this is Next Step 1. This was out in like 89. So it's broadly, I guess, comparable historically to Windows 3, for example. So we've got a full sort of GUI, we've got a terminal, and we've got everyone's favorite editor there. Fun sort of Next trivia-ish. Tim Berners-Lee used a Next computer to create the World Wide Web. I think it's the big legacy thing of Nextcube. They were really cool, really expensive, didn't sell very well, but one of them made the internet happen, which is kind of important, I suppose. So, 1997, Steve Jobs comes back to Apple. So the macOS is sort of getting old and creaky and struggling a bit. Apple needs a more modern operating system. And they've been looking around in the marketplace, and they've not found anything. And then they have the bright idea, we should just buy Next. If we buy Next, we get Steve back. We get this modern operating system. This will solve all of our problems. So Steve originally said, I'll be an advisor, I won't be CEO. And then they twisted his arm, and he got Johnny Ive in, and they put I in front of a bunch of things. And the rest is, as they say, is history. So, and what it means is we then get a brand new macOS operating system. So this is macOS 10. And I get to call it macOS 10 and not feel bad about doing so, because this is macOS 10. So this is built on Next Step. Yeah, we'll do two. So this is built on Next Step. So we have that Unix core, but we've also built like a pretty, I've scared it away. I have as well. Oh, no, it's back. Yeah, so this is built on Next Step. So we have like a Mac front end. You can run OS 9 apps in a kind of compatibility layer, not quite Rosetta, but kind of. Like everything old is new again. I must admit as well, I started my Mac career, I don't do classic Mac OS, so I started my Mac career on Panther. And it's been quite nice going back and sort of reliving the early 2000s. Like as a tech support person, I would see Jaguar in the wild. Like 10.2 was I would actually go and have to troubleshoot and fix those. And I had Panther on my system. So this is a modern Mac OS-ish, if we're calling 2001 modern. And then, so finally, because I'm on point, I use a little bit of AI just to validate. So, okay, VI it's part of the Unix standard. So any Unix operating system has to have VI installed. Mac OS is still a Unix-based operating system, and that means we absolutely all have VI installed on our Macs. So my apologies, Larry, my apologies, Jeff, but there it is. So now I promised we'd do some sort of practical Vim. The problem with this is, so I have the stupid Unix beard, but I'm not actually very good at this stuff. I dream of being like a power user of Vim, and I'm just not. But I can pretend that I am. We're not recording, right? It'll be fine. The secret's safe. So to get started, a really useful place to get started is just running Vim Tutor. So this is on every Mac, or I guess every Unix system. You can run Vim Tutor. You get like little sort of instructions. It walks you through how to do the navigation, then jump around and do things. It requires no internet. I did this first on a train once. So if you're stuck, bored with no internet, and your phone battery's flying, learn some Vim for 20 minutes. Similarly, Vim Adventures. Does your favorite text editor have its own computer game? Because this one does. Boom. Likewise, if we're actually going to get geeky, there's a Vim configuration file, and there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do to customize and tweak your Vim environment. I'm trying to be good and not go too crazy, but also I'm trying to look like I know what I'm talking about to impress all of you. What I would say, though, if you're going to turn any of these on, syntax on, line 7, just turn syntax on. It means anything, Python files, source file, everything, just syntax highlighting, it just makes the whole thing much more readable. Similar-ish with line numbers, with line 3 set number. The search stuff is really cool, we'll talk about it in a bit, so incremental search and highlight search. And then if you're masochist, there's even a spell checker. So I will occasionally write a blog post, and I'll use Vim, and it will help with the fat fingers. And then this is fun, again, so it supports split screen. So you can do a horizontal split, and then Control W to bounce between your two windows. Or you can do a vertical split. Or if you're feeling really clever, you can do a split after you've done your vertical split and have more Vim windows than you know what to do with. Maybe don't do that. Again, Control W to navigate through. Again, you can fire up a terminal, so you can launch a terminal from within. So which VM, what's the path to that? Great. I can exit that and go back. I mean, probably pointless, like just open multiple windows, but I've SSH'd into something. There are reasons. Or I'm just trying to find cool things to do with Vim. Likewise, searching, this is fun. So again, one of the things I use Vim for a lot is if I'm looking through like a log file or a text file or something, rather than just catting it and grepping it, I'll stick it through Vim, and I can do / for a search. You type in your search term, enter, and then just N through all of your occurrences. And again, you can see the examples of the highlight search. As you start typing, it will start to sort of autocomplete and stuff. So It's one of those things where, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff in a VimRC. Just Google for other people's examples. There are color schemes and all sorts of stuff. I think what I'm trying to do is keep mine reasonably simple because I nuke this machine all the time. It's a test box. But putting a few things back that make my text editing life easier is always good. And that's me done. With the most important command, right? The most important command, the one you use to actually quit. Although, be warned with the exclamation mark. So that's force quit, don't save. So when I first started using Vim, I would screw things up and I would do this automatically. Even when I got my save right, I would do it and then quit and not save. Anyway, but there you go. Thanks for coming to learn more about Vim. Any questions? No. Cool. I don't know, I have no idea how long or short I've run. I think I might be vaguely on time. Oh, a question.
Is this your favorite editor?
To be honest, I use VS Code like everyone else. But I do turn on Vim bindings in VS Code because I'm a masochist. Like I say, for like short hacks and editing something quickly, yeah, it's quite nice to just fire up a terminal. Maybe actually, I'm sharing too much. As a kid, maybe that stems from that DOS to Windows experience. Because if you had a 286 running Windows, it ran like crap. So if you want to do anything useful or speedily, you'd go back to DOS anyway. So I think maybe that's where my desire of launching a terminal to do stuff comes from.
Potentially stupid question. What's the difference between Vim and VI?
So no, that's a good question. So basically VI, although this is a whole other talk, I think. So VI is like the original OG. Vim is someone else's port. So I think there's a whole history where there was a version of VI for the Atari ST called Stevie that some Dutch dude rewrote for the Amiga, which was the birth of Vim. And so it's VI improved. So it's basically an improved version of Vim. And broadly, most modern systems. In fact, when I was doing my homework, macOS Panther was the first one that actually had Vim, not VI. And so Vim is a lot more forgiving, and there's way more plugins and more things you can do. I mean, to sort of go full circle, there's also a project now called NeoVim. To sort of create a new sort of branch of Vim and to build a whole bunch of stuff. So the Vim code base has got a bunch of cruft in it, and it's hard to get things changed. And so NeoVim is a project to kind of keep the weird, the incredibly powerful modal editing, but have a new plugin framework. So yeah. See, I promise I've done my homework. No one needed to know that, did they? No, okay. Cool. All right, well, thanks for coming for this small and intimate gathering. This is, Cheers. And safe travels home, everyone.